with fond memories of the old line. Its rather sad demise and eventual closure in 1966 marked the end of an era of steam in the West Country. For some considerable time now, since leaving Bath, I've been walking along, wherever possible, the track beds of the old Somerset and Dorset Railway. And now I've finally reached the outskirts of the town of Radstock. Now I know I've reached the outskirts of Radstock because although this may look to you like an ordinary hill, it isn't. It's made up of spill from the mines. It's a slag heap, and all around, surrounding me, are slag heaps. And you can see just behind me down there 2 neat rows of what were once miners' cottages. And these men dug that coal out of this soil, loaded it onto the Somerset and Dorset Railway to go all over the country. And for that time they were open, at least, it brought prosperity to Radstock. Travelling south, the S&D encountered the Somerset coalfields at Ridlington and moved on into the industry centre at Radstock, where Middle Pit, Tyning's Colliery and Ludlow Pit soon transported their coal on the railway, which welcomed this opportunity.
It was this coal industry that the directors of the Somerset and Dorset Railway obviously saw as their salvation. And when they built the line across the mendips from Evercreech to Bath, this was the major traffic that they were after. And I know it's been recorded that in the first 11 months of traffic exchanging from the Somerset and Dorset to the Midland Railway at Bath, over 110,000 tonnes of goods was exchanged, and about 90,000 tonnes down at Temple Combe with the London South Western. And I suspect that the vast majority of that was coal from the Radstock area. You had all of these coal trains working south and north from Radstock. It had its own locomotive shed with shunting engines, which were running out to the collieries, taking back the empty coal wagons, bringing back the loaded ones, and they were remarshalled in the sidings in the middle of Radstock. And then they would be added to or detached from the through trains that were going through. So all this activity was going on. And although a lot of the mines, the majority of the mines, I suppose, had closed by the 1950s, the production of those that remained was going up and up and up all the time. So the amount of coal going out was probably still quite substantial.
I'm on what's left of the Great Western Railway station here in Radstock, and there's quite a bit more left lower down, including rails and sidings. Of the S&D, I'm afraid on that side of Radstock, absolutely nothing. It's though it's been wiped off the face of the earth quite deliberately. Indeed, it's even more insulting than that, for Radstock North Station today celebrates the triumph of the motor car as a landscape car park, even though I cannot recall many Somerset county towns of similar size with a greater traffic problem than faces Radstock today. Do you see what I mean? And this is mid-afternoon. You should see it in the evening when they all leave work and set off for home in the surrounding villages. Chaos. Mind you, in the heyday of the S&D and the Great Western Railway here, there were also great traffic problems, with both companies' level crossing gates positioned in the centre of the town. Indeed, as early as 1874, just 3 months after the opening of the S&D line here, complaints were made to this company concerning the alleged detentions of the public road traffic caused by the gates. Imagine what chaos they would cause today. At least the track bed of the line has become another splendid linear walk with occasional poignant visual reminders of the old mining industry. I've climbed up from Radstock and reached the village of Hayden and entered the Radstock and District Mining Museum. It's like a moment frozen in time around the miners and their families, and I'm going to be talking about them. But first, I'm going to be talking about this: coal.
About a week after my 14th birthday, I started underground.
And what, was there really no other chance of you to have any other kind of job?
There was, but it was generally accepted that lads would normally go down the pit unless you went to grammar school, maybe get work on the farms or something like that. But generally speaking, most of the lads went down the pit if they were mining families.
And of course you were following in a long family tradition.
A family tradition, yeah.
What would you have done at that age?
Well, the job was carton boy at that age, and that meant you would, remember it was all hand got in those days, work done by hand, and a carton boy wearing this, which is the goss rope and the crook, that's the goss and crook, they would drag this sledge into where the men, into the coal face, where the men were getting the coal, and it wouldn't be much higher than this here, and you would fill it with coal that you got by hand, and you would load it, it owes a 100 weight and a half, and you would drag it back out, and it'd be put into a wagon, a little wooden tub similar to the one here, and taken away in trains to go up the shaft, and you would do that for 8 hours.
You dragged it. Now, where did you put that rope? Round
the waist, yeah, round the waist, and the chain back through the legs, and then you would crawl like it would be like a horse put in a cart.
Could you stand upright to pull it?
Oh no, you would have to crawl, yeah. Actually, yeah, you would always have to crawl because the highest seams were about 4 foot, at the highest that is, and some were only, they were 18-inch seams in those days. So you can imagine you would be flat out.
Crawling, dragging 100 weight and a half in that
yes, yeah.
Sledge. And you did that how long?
Oh, you do it the whole of the shift, which would be the working time, probably about 7 hours, because you would be allowed travelling in and travelling, deduct that, about 7 hours.
And once you were down, of course, Red, you just stayed down, did you?
Yeah, that's it, yeah. And if you didn't get down on time, then you would be sent home in those days. And no such thing as being late for work. You were either late and you didn't get work.
Tell me what you used to do with that.
Well, this is the hand pick that was used in Somerset. Now, these are removable. And you can imagine that during the course of a shift, let's say 7 hours continually using, they would get blunt, so they could tap the key out and change the blade. At the end of the shift, they would bring the blades out and put them in the box at the bottom of the shaft to go up to the blacksmith shop and be sharpened. And then sent down for the next day, start of the same shift. And they would pick out their own blades and they would buy about 6, you know, they probably used 3 or 4 in the shift. In the Somerset, they bought all their own tools
Oh.
except the shovel. Why they issued shovels, I never knew, but they did.
I imagine too that when you were home, and because you all lived in, I imagine, the miners' terrace cottages
Yeah,
and in tight-knit little communities, I imagine you had a good community spirit, did you?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, all the neighbours sort of looked out to one another. There was a lot of trust between neighbours, be fair. You know, there's a different world today. There was no television. I don't ever remember having a radio at home. And I left home till I was 18, so no television, no videos, things like that to worry about.
You had to make your own amusement.
Oh yeah, there's no shortage of things to do. All the railways were basically here to deal with the coal plus passengers. I think in the Somerset Coalfield produced at one time, I think got 750,000 tonnes a year. And by hand, that was, you know, that the S&D dealt with the collieries on the south side and the Great Western ones on the north side of the coalfield.
So you'd have sent it around on the Somerset and Dorset?
Yes, and at one time the Somerset was 246 square miles, and it contained anything up to 80 coal mines, and employed 12 to 14,000 coal miners at one time. So you can say it's quite a big industry. A lot of people don't realise that.
From Radstock to Midsummer Norton, the train had to tackle the 7.5-mile climb up to Masbury Summit, and every freight train required the assistance of a banking engine. On the way, they passed over the North Somerset Viaduct, known locally as Five Arches, for obvious reasons. Here, the S&D crossed the Great Western Line and their own Welton tramway line. This viaduct was repaired in 1993 by Wansdyke Council, who also constructed a children's playground beneath. The linear walk here offers two choices. You can either cross over or walk down and through the Five Arches. Either way, it's a delightful walk. The plaque was placed here by Wansdyke Council to commemorate the life of the S&D and as an acknowledgement of their restoration work on this viaduct. I've arrived in Midsummer Norton. Down there, Midsummer Norton South Railway Station. In its heyday, known as the best kept railway station on the entire Somerset and Dorset line, and even today it's the best preserved railway station out of the 45 that were once on that railway line. Midsummer Norton Station was not only, at least in my opinion, one of the most attractive looking stations on the entire S&D line, but was most definitely one of the best kept, particularly during the period between 1953 and 1960, when it was unbeaten in the Best Kept Station Awards competition begun in 1913. During the 1970s, a local school project elected to undertake restoration work on this station. This work was later taken over by the Avon County Council Youth Training Programme, so this station has received a fair amount of restoration work over the past years. Today, I'm delighted to say it's been acquired by the Somerset and Dorset Railway Trackbed Trust, who have every intention of restoring not only the station to its former glory, but, I'm assured, relaying the line for some distance and acquiring an engine and carriages to travel along it. And I wish them all the luck in the world. I've climbed up onto the top of Chilcompton Tunnel. This tunnel has a twin bore, which was totally due to the fact that the railway was constructed as a single line and only later was it doubled. It's a handsome village, Chilcompton. I'm afraid there's nothing left of the old railway station, but if you look at this photograph of how it used to look, now there on the left-hand side you'll see a Bentley motor car. That was the property of the man who took these photographs and most of the moving pictures, Ivo Peters.
The cine film started in the 50s, the late 50s. He'd never taken any cine film before, and somebody showed him, in fact, I think it was an 8mm video, cine, which he thought was all right, and he then had a go, so to speak, and was very pleased with the results. But all his cine film is in colour. He never did any black and white cine film, and most of his still shots are in black and white. And in fact, on the Somerset and Dorset, there are only black and white photographs, and there's only colour cine film. It's not his first camera, it's a Bell & Howell, as you can see. It's a fixed aperture, it doesn't have a zoom lens, it's clockwork. It isn't automatic. He had a Western light meter that he used to use. And I mean, this is going back to the Ark.
And I imagine, sort of over a period, he became very, very well known by all railway workers and enthusiasts.
He was certainly well known down the Somerset and Dorset, yes. I mean, people used to recognise the Bentley, for starters, when that arrived. But lots of people knew him. All the train crews knew him and would wave. And yes, he was very well known, as were his pictures, because each year he put together an album, and that album used to travel down the Somerset and Dorset. It was put on a train in Bath, and it got out at the first station at Midford. And when they'd looked at it there, it was passed on down the line. And he used to get it back. I don't know how long it took for the album to go down the line, but he and his work were well known.
Of course, the Bentley was an essential part of his equipment, wasn't it?
Yes, he'd had two Bentleys that I remember, one similar to this, and one, in fact, an earlier model. And they were fast and they were comfortable. And he certainly on occasions used to chase trains if there was something really special. He knew 5 or maybe 6 locations that he could beat the train, and photographed it and jumped in the car and photographed it and jumped in the car and photographed it. And they were quite hairy on occasions, those chases. Certainly if the crew got to know about it, because they would then see if they could race him. So,
So you'd have this herring round those tight little lanes and the train with smoke and spark coming out. I like that.
Yes,
I lovely.
yes.
I wish somebody had filmed both of them. Tim, you've got a lovely motor car here. Well, it's in beautiful condition.
It's a 1949 model, exactly the same model as the one that Ivo used to drive. And I first came across the car when I started work for Imperial Tobacco in 1966. And it used to be sat in the garage there under a dust sheet. One day I thought I'd like to own it. So after about 6 years, I managed to purchase the car from Sir John Partridge. And it came with the replacement engine in it and the original engine in a box. So my first priority was to try and rebuild that. We managed to rebuild the original engine from all the bits we had. But underneath the car, there'd been a tiny oil leak from the gearbox, which had kept the underside completely rust-free all its life. So basically, you see the car as it is now.
Well, I've got a journey on now to Vinegar, and what better way than to travel in this lovely old Bentley with Tim and Julian. go, gentlemen. Well, they've dropped me at Vinegar Station, and this delightful house has been designed to fit lengthwise onto the track bed. And ironically, the owner has named the house after the man whose destructive actions to the railway have enabled him to live in this delightful setting. Dr. Beechin.
It's in between the platforms, so the front half of the house is built on the side which was the up line, and the back side of the house is on the down line. So when we bought the station site off British Rail, I thought that the good gentleman ought to be immortalised. If it hadn't been for him, I don't suppose the house would have been built and the station buildings would still have stood and the line still running. The two cottages just here, the one facing north was where the station master always lived, and it's named after the station master as a station master's house. And the other side facing south was the signalman's cottage, and that's what we call Station Cottage. And also we had what we've always called the beer and bitter line running into the station, which was a narrow gauge line which ran from Vinegar to Oak Hill, the Oak Hill Brewery, where the famous Oak Hill Stout was brewed, and it was put onto the narrow gauge line and brought into Vinegar Station and offloaded onto Main Line. And it must have been in that day very, very busy, but it all ceased before the Second World War.
Rising up on the summit of the Mendip, these rusting iron girders and crumbling stone pillars stand out like memorial columns proclaiming the destruction of a railway.
Series, photographer Chris Chapman explores the Mendip Hills.
Best and continue to chug along the Somerset and Dorset Railway.
Welcome to another programme in this series travelling from Bath to Bournemouth, following the disused track bed of the once thriving Somerset and Dorset Railway. Axed in the 60s by Dr. Beechin, today only a few of the old S&D bridges, viaducts and tunnels survive. On our way, I'll be talking to local people with fond memories of the old line. Its rather sad demise and eventual closure in 1966 marked the end of an era of steam in the West Country. Musbury Castle, an Iron Age hill fort standing 957 feet above sea level on the summit of the 1 in 50 gradient the trains had to tackle after leaving Radstock, and it's situated only a short walk from Musbury Station. I've been thinking as I've climbed up towards Masbury Summit, where the trains used to come puffing and sparking. And now look, it's a jungle. 30 years, that's all it's taken. I've arrived at Masbury Station, and I've come to meet a man who for many years was a station master for the S&D and now lives in Masbury Station House. Wilfred Coulden, pleased to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Clive.
We've picked a lovely day too, haven't we?
Yes, beautiful.
What a handsome place you've got.
If you went back to the 30s, these stations were used then because all the goods and passenger traffic, all the goods and parcel traffic for all the local inhabitants came in, you see, and people came here and fetched their goods. You had to send them an advice to say that their thing of tea or something was here waiting for them. You know, the farmers used to have these, what do you call it, casks, their line casks of tea, they used to have them and that sort of thing.
Yes, yeah.
But all that happened, you see. Today, or once road transport got going, all this disappeared.
Would there have been a full-time station master here?
Back in the 30s, I would say. Well, Mr. Light was the last one, I believe, about 1933. We came here in 54, and in 55 they told us they weren't stopping the trains any longer because on the up line, you see, it's 1 in 50 gradient through here, and if a train stops, it loses 5 minutes. Time it gets started again.
Yes, that long, slow sort of haul,
right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And could they do it with the one engine up here, or did they double?
No, if it was over a certain weight, over, I think it was 8 coaches, over 8 coaches. Most of the local trains were only 2 or 3 coaches on. Passenger traffic was never any great guns, you know. In 1966, when this line closed, the trains were empty. Nobody travelled from Chilcompton and Binniger or even Midsummer Norton to Shepton Mallet. They wouldn't do it. It was useless. I mean, if you lived in Chilcompton, you'd have a half a mile walk to the station, and when you got to Shepton Mallet, you had a mile walk to the town. And they had a bus service instituted. Now that killed the railway.
All the milk from all the way around the farmers used to get sent away from this station. It was a very busy station. And all the feeding stuff used to come in trucks, all the cattle feed and that used to come in trucks. There used to be a lot of beet pulp used in them days for feeding and that. And there was a coal in here. It was quite a big site in here. It was quite a busy station. You used to be able to go to Bath about Saturday, well, you could any night, but it used to be Saturday nights if we did go. And you used to go there for a shilling, return, and do all the shopping. You used to go up on the 5 o'clock and used to get back here about 10 o'clock.
What was the last one you could catch back from Bath?
That was the time, that was the last one you could catch back that just stopped. They did go all the time down through there because the trains did run all night long. And in the summer when the excursions was on, well, they would run all night long. When it used to go from Birmingham to Bournemouth. And it was nothing fresh to have 40 or 50 excursions go down of a Saturday. They'd take them down for a week and they'd come back on the next week. They'd go down full up, they'd come back full up because with the people that had been down there would come back the next week.
So it was a really very busy place, wasn't it?
It was a busy place, yes. Although it's right out in the country, it was very busy because, like I said, all the stuff had to come in by rail and all the farmers in that round had to come to the station to pick it all up. And the papers used to come in on the station too, for they used to come down from Bath. And they used to get picked up here and then round to the villages.
You're looking at a unique railway carriage. It was one of only 21, and even amongst those 21, it was special. Built for the Great Western Railway, it has very strong connections with the Somerset and Dorset Railway. I'm going to get aboard, and I'd love to tell you before it went away, but I can't because it's buried in concrete. For 30 years, this was a home for a very large family, and it was known then, and is still known locally here, as Flowerside Bungalow.
It was bought as a living carriage in the 1920s, and I think 1928 they brought this up the Somerset and Dorset to Chilcompton Station, and then brought it along the road on a horse-drawn timber wagon, established it here, and a family lived here by the name of Peppard, brought up a family in this carriage. They were a village family. They used to wear shiny gaiters, black gaiters. They were a very clean family that lived in this carriage. He had a brother. He lived in a caravan just across the road, actually, an ordinary caravan. He used to call this Quality Street, which is a log here. He had many dealer friends. He had many friends in the aristocracy because he was actually one of the first hippies, and he taught many of the young people of the 60s how to be a hippie. They used to come down here and they'd bring a hare and they would cook it around the campfire, and they would come along with all their friends and they would love it. Apparently it was built 1870s at Swindon, GWR. It's got GWR in all the hinges when it was built. And apparently they made 21 of them, and not many of them, if only one, had this double door in the middle. So the enthusiasts were quite keen about this. They're not sure whether it was for invalid or goods or what it was for, but apparently they made 21 of these, and he had each one documented as it was made.
Once over the summit and descending, the landscape opens up into a glorious plain beneath, incorporating the Isle of Avalon and a view away to Glastonbury and its tour. I often wonder what effect this first sighting of such Somerset splendour must have had on the passengers seeing it in the soft dawn light, having left behind the dirt and grime of the industrial north and travelled through the night to emerge into this wonder. Walking along in the warm sunshine through an abundance of wild flowers and shrubs, it's difficult to believe I'm not wandering through an uncultivated meadow, but instead I'm crossing a viaduct spanning a densely wooded ravine far below. I'm approaching Windsor Hill Tunnel. The two tunnels here, because of the original single line working, were drilled at different times and, strange to say, are different lengths. The original bore was 242 yards long, but the second, by slightly altering its course, is only 132 yards. The first tunnel cost the lives of 4 workmen crushed by a rockfall whilst cutting the hole. They are buried in a communal grave in Shepton Mallet Cemetery, and the rock provides their tombstone.
When the trains went up and down, the windows in the house did rattle, quite rattle,
really?
Vibrate, even from where they are there. And you could tell in the trains. And then at night, when they used to open the firebox to throw in some more coal, light it all up. You know, it's quite a glow. Used to use a lot of coal, Then they threw out some coal. The men that worked on the line had these little huts all the way up through. And you would see them, engine driver and or the coalman, he'd throw out the coal for these people in the huts so they could keep a fire going in the winter when they were working on the line, see? Their lunch hour.
Was that courtesy, or were they supposed to do
Well,
that?
I don't know. I don't know what they were supposed to know. They used to look after him. Well, I know. Yeah.
I suppose you got to know most of the staff.
Oh, yes,
pretty well.
we know a lot of staff on the line. Yeah, yes. Oh, yeah, we see them very often. They used to keep the fence, you see. All the fence was kept up. Perfect. You didn't have no trouble with the fence at all. Now, of course, we got to do it ourselves now.
Well, it must have been, I would imagine, a very sad day when you knew that you were about to see the very last train
Yes, it
come
was.
through.
Yes, it was. We missed them a lot. It was a sad day. We missed it a lot. You know, we just sort of lived with it. It was part of life.
Continuing towards Shepton Mallet, the line crosses the Bath Road Viaduct, part of which collapsed in 1946 and was eventually repaired, but today is again urgently requiring attention. This scaffolding is not there for working men, but to prevent masonry falling on the people beneath. Further along, the track crosses what is accepted as the architectural masterpiece of the S&D, the curving beauty of the 27-span Charlton Viaduct. And the view from the train reveals the showering garden that employed 4 gardeners, maintaining its enormous number of plants and shrubs and its attractive water features.
This one is the most impressive. And the reason it's in such good condition is it continues to have a lot of money spent on it. A very big structure. And when it was first built, I mean, just think they had to actually plan this. Somebody probably got on a horse at Evercreech and sort of plotted his way across the hills and the dales on horseback and plotted this route. And he got here, and there's this sort of big hole at Shepton Mallet. And the only way you're going to get across it is to throw these massive viaducts across. I mean, if nothing else, they had confidence in those days in what they were doing. And remember that this was a single line, built as a single line. So this viaduct was a very spindly affair. You imagine it half the width it is now, because it didn't get doubled until the sort of 1880s, 1890s. When it was actually built about 1871, 72, single line, very high here in the middle, and the locals, you know, were very worried about travelling over it. They didn't like going over these viaducts. This was something completely new to them. This and that one were 2 of 7 that were built when this line was constructed in the early 1870s, and this was the link from Evercreech up to Bath, where the Somerset and Dorset Railway finally got a north-south route. And by doing so, it was able to have through traffic from the Midland Railway, from the north of England, down through the Midlands, Gloucester, Bath, and then across these 26 very difficult miles to build, down to Evercreech, then on down through Templecombe, the Stour Valley to Poole, and eventually to Bournemouth. I don't know if you've noticed, but on a lot of these stations, they're 1 or 2 miles from the village. And today, would people walk that far to catch the train? No, of course they wouldn't, because of all the alternative means of transport available to them. But in the 1870s, when this was built, this line here was built, yes, they would, because it was the only way to travel. Suddenly, from having to walk perhaps 10 miles to the local market, they could walk 2 miles and catch a train to anywhere. So the whole of the country opened up. It was just a case of could you actually afford to travel?
It was a popular station because even W.H. Smith, they had a paper stand there. Cigarette machines where you could get one single cigarette, R-dot, for a penny. And then for those that didn't smoke, the Five Boys, again, a penny bar of chocolate. And then locally they had 2 horse-drawn vehicles that would take the goods, and almost everything that was sold in the shops came in by train. And a lad with a bar also, so there was this continuous traffic from the town out to the S&D. A very, very busy station.
Shepton Mallet has a history dating back to its colonisation by the men of Claudius I's Roman army in AD 43. Its name is derived from the Anglo-Saxon Scaepton, sheep town, and that of a Norman presented with the town and surrounding estates by William the Conqueror, Baron William Mallet. The town contains a maze of these narrow winding lanes with curious names like the Batch, Cat's Ash, leading into Zion Hill. The church of St. Peter and St. Paul began life as a simple rectangular Saxon church, but over the years has acquired a great many additions and embellishments. A short distance away from this church to the east, an extremely long high stone wall has been erected, and behind is the oldest working prison in England, built on this site in 1625. During the last war, it was an American military prison and also housed Domesday Book and Magna Carta. But the latter-day prosperity of Shepton Mallet was built on its surrounding sheep farms and the town's woolen mills.
When the S&D arrived, Shepton was still smarting from the final decline of the woolen and textile industry. Shepton Mallet was a woolen town, part of the West Country woolen industry. And as an example, in 1790, we were at our height. Shepton Mallet had a population of 10,000. It had 5,000 people directly employed in the mills, apart from supporting service industries. And then by 1850, this had crashed, the population had crashed, and the workers directly employed in the mills had fallen from 5,000 to just 500. So Shepton Mallet was devastated, totally isolated, and it was obviously despairing. There was talk of the town completely closing down. And then the S&D came to town. So it was our salvation. It was really the salvation of the town.
What sort of materials would they be carrying out of Shepton Mallet? They must have done very well with goods here.
Well, they would have had this continuous convoy of traffic from the Anglo-Bavarian brewery. Then we had the Chorlton brewery, which was quite close to the station. We would have grain coming in to make malt, and then on the outgoing we would have the finished goods, the beers, the ciders. There was other small brewers that were starting as well. I mean, you may know the Showering family that went on, and we know better, the golden age of Babysham, and they were making headway as well at that particular time. So yes, it marked the beginning of something great for Shepton Mallet.
Why Anglo-Bavarian? Was it a Bavarian beer?
What happened? In 1870, it was taken over by the Garton family, who were based in Southampton. And they had come to Shepton. encouraged by the fact that we were now at this super communications with the railways, and decided they wanted to brew a different beer. So they had people over from Bavaria to brew a very light ale. And it is said that it's the first lager brewery in the UK. And still it stands today, that great Victorian structure that dominates the valley. It was mainly the Bournemouth trip that I remember so well. Again, relying on my father rather than me, describing their trips to Bournemouth in his young days. And he would tell me there was no corridor trains at that time. They were very much like the charabancs. You had a compartment with a door on either side, and which gave you privacy. But he said that once you've been down to Bournemouth and you've tanked up with a few beers, you had to keep your legs crossed, and when you got back to Shepton, there was one hell of a rush for the toilets.
But one of the most magnificent things they built was that viaduct, of course.
We call it now the Mulberry Viaduct. It was the Babysham Gardens. That super backcloth that we see, we tend to forget the importance of the S&D to the town at that time, but that was built by a chap named Walker. He described it in any event as only a small contract because he was awaiting greater things. He went on to build the Severn Tunnel and the Manchester Ship Canal. So this was just a small contract that slotted in between. I think it was a horrendous undertaking when you think of he had to excavate all these cuttings and span the valleys throughout the foothills of the mendips. It was a super undertaking.
For me, the joy of Shepton Mallet remains the peace and beauty of the now named Mulberry Gardens with their graceful curving sculptural backdrop of Charlton Viaduct.
This can't be.
I'm afraid so, sir.
I'm telling you, I felt a cold, dead body lying beside me in bed. Do you understand?
I feel that every night. Warm brandy helps.